gentlemen, I just want to remind you that we actually have an email list and we would love you to join us. If you want to sign up, go to www.thewizardandthepriestess.com and find your sign up button. Join us today. Hello and welcome to The Wizard and the Priestess. We are in the year of the snake.
Solid accent.
We are your hosts, Wizard and Priestess, coming in at you from where we are.
Live
in
and
the
hot.
world.
Coming in.
Coming in. So we had this thing. Oh, do we have a question? Please make it short and simple.
Can't find it.
What's a question that's come to mind? Question came in that said, hey, you said you were going to do discovery calls and you didn't do them. And so
Not really
I was like, anyway, I found that I hadn't set that up, but it is set up. So if you're listening to this now, you have an opportunity to have a discovery call with Matt and I together, and we have 3 slots available. So if you want to jump onto that, you could learn about your year from our perspectives.
Boom.
Tune in. All right. But anyway, on another note, we were really interested because we were, Matt was obviously doing wizardy things and he found this, found some information. It's something we've talked about previously, but you know, why is there different New Year's? Like, why is the Chinese New Year landing on the new moon, the first new moon? Why is the astrological New Year in April? Why are these things changing? Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so now we've gone down and we have, done a little bit of our own research just to get clear on what is going on with that. And I thought it was really interesting. Now, Matt, did you want to add to that?
Well, there's a few rabbit holes to go down. And it's just
I don't want you to go down them yet.
No, just chill. I got this. It's just interesting, like the history of calendars and how and why it's changed throughout time. So what did you want to start with?
Yeah, cool. So I just wanted to start with what I'd done. So my research time was is useful because I did lots of research and then next minute Matt's done lots of research too. So now we're over-researched and we've probably done the same research, which is hopefully going to give you guys a bit of breadth. But
I don't reckon we have. I reckon I've nailed mine, but yep.
Oh, please. Okay, so
go.
What I found was that we had I've made a bit of a mess of this, but realistically what Matt found, do you want to share what you found the other day?
Yes.
Okay.
You go.
All right. So what we essentially, if we split the year into 13 months, added another month, made every month 28 days, we would literally be like bang on 28 days. Now, which means that why is it that we've got this Greg's calendar where we have some months this month, some months that month, every 3 years we have a leap year. What's the deal with that? So what I found was if we take one step, so Greg's calendar, which is pretty interesting, only came in to become to take over from the predecessor calendar, which we'll go into in a sec, in 1582. So it's only been around for 500 years. So that's kind of interesting. The first thing to remember, to be conscious of. Anything that predates 500 years was based in the Julian calendar, which was commanded by Julius Caesar. And both of the calendars are based on 12 months with the 1 month leap year. Now, Greg's calendar made it as it is today and adjusted the initial, adjusted so that the new year started on January 1st. Now, everyone knows and feels that January 1st is off, right? Like, it doesn't feel like that should be a new year if you are following the seasons, especially if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. For us in the Southern Hemisphere, it could feel really abundant to be the 1st of Jan because it's like we are in summertime, we are in, full, for the Western life as it is today, everyone's had a holiday. They've like enjoyed their Christmas, they've had their holiday, and now they're usually having a bit of a break. And so that's kind of the new year. So for us in the Southern Hemisphere, it sort of makes sense that we can allow that to be because we've created life around that new year time. Whereas in the Northern Hemisphere, you literally have Christmas, or you have this big celebration for Christmas and then this big New Year's celebration literally within the week, like we all do, but it's in the middle of winter. It's not when the necessarily, okay, it might be at that equinox point, but it's not even at the equinox point. It's a week after the equinox or a little bit more, 10 days. So it's sort of a bit skew-if anyway. So this is the thing that Matt found. Do you want to share about why things changed from being a potential 13-month calendar, Matt?
Well, I found lots of different reasons, but the most common one really was because before the Gregorian calendar came in, it was falling on seasonal equinoxes, which were essentially falling too early for some church holidays. And these, like for example, Easter is a church holiday. And eventually, just because of the irregular times, it wasn't on the same date every time. It didn't fall within the proper season. So it wasn't convenient for the church. So the church had to keep changing it, essentially. And then so it was changed by Pope Greg, hence the Gregorian calendar. But before that, New Year's Day was on spring equinox in the Northern Hemisphere because that was
Kind of.
well, it was the start of, it was either the spring equinox or the start of spring,
But what
depending.
they did was they chose a date too. So it was March 25th they chosen. So they chose March 25th. So whilst that might be like a springy time, it is still a date that was chosen. That makes sense.
Yeah. Which makes
Um,
a lot of sense because in spring, the earth is coming back to life. It's all the flowers are starting to sprout. There's new life within the animal kingdom. So it makes sense. You can see how the earlier humans saw that as a new beginning, a new life, a new season. And the end of the year was essentially around 31st of October because that was the last day of harvest and the start of winter for a lot of the world, or for the northern parts of the world.
so what happened from the 31st of October to the 25th of
Well, it was
March?
just the silent period. They had a new year that lasted that entire time. Not that they celebrated the entire time, but it was hunker down and just prepare for the new year. It
Yeah,
it it,
right.
it itself was its own season.
Yeah, okay. Right, winter.
Yep.
They call that winter.
Could have sounded more bogan there.
All right, but interesting. So let's go even more on this. I'm going to come back to what Matt just said in it and give you a bit of a different tangent on that. But what we've got so far is Greg only came into power, Pope Gregory, 1582. He put his foot down and said, I want this to be this way. The
Mhm.
thing is, people that was Europe, so that was Roman, not Roman, that was the Pope's Italian, right? So that he made that decision. But Great Britain actually didn't connect or convert themselves to Greg's calendar until 1752. So if you were living in Europe and you've got dates or whatever before 1752, it's actually going to be different because you're not on the same dates. And then you have Julius Caesar, who came in 45 BC and created his own calendar away from what did I just write that down? The Romans calendar.
Mhm.
And then there's also, along with these calendars, there was the Hebrew calendar and the Chinese calendar, and then the Mayan calendar. And there was obviously many others because there wasn't internet or technology. So everyone was living on their own calendar. But all of the calendars were based upon the lunar and solar cycles. Now we moved away from the lunar cycles and towards the solar cycles. And I think that's something that I've kind of put together. It was less about the lunar cycles and more about the solar energy cycles. So they were based upon more about the sun than they were about the moon.
Yeah.
Whereas the earlier calendars were more based upon the moon cycles. And the moon and the sun, whilst they're in sync and floating together, they do have differing trajectories in a sense because they're cycling within cycling.
Yeah.
So I think that's quite interesting to note. Now, all of these calendars that I found, the 13th month, there was actually a leap month added to bring everything back into energetic alignment. So that wasn't added all the time, and it was added whenever they felt they needed to add it. So if they were about to get to this point where things were shifting, they would then go, hang on a minute, we are shifting or we're not shifting. Let's add in some days here. Now, obviously, in our world, that would be very confusing. You wouldn't necessarily, but that is what I find. I often say, I'm like, well, the seasons are shifting, you know, all of a sudden we're still in spring and it's not, it's still winter time. And we're like, hang on a minute, it's still cold.
That's because of climate change, right?
Or, I mean, I thought about this saying this last night, or it could be just because from the geoengineering that's occurring. So who knows where and why we're actually having a seasonal shift.
Yeah.
But
So
I would say
if it's a cool day in Southern Hemisphere on the 1st of December, the world goes to shit. So that's how non-adaptable we've become in relation to these dates.
Yes. But okay, a few things. In Latin, the word September means 7. October is 8. We know that, octuplets. November 9, and December is 10. December, right?
Decem or decem, I don't know.
Whatever. Decenni or decenni is 10. We know that. Deciliter is 10. So, or 100. So, we are realistically, the first month was March, right? Because then that would align with us to be that December was the 10th month. Anyway, it's quite an interesting thing. And what I was throwing over to Matt to share with you, which he didn't yet, but I will, is that the cycles, there is somewhat of a bit, could potentially be a bit of a sinister underlying to why we don't have, say, 13 months or 28 days. Or so from what I'm understanding, the moon cycle's at 29 and a half days, and it fluctuates because it must, because it's a half day, which means that if we're going to move with the moon, we do need the wiggle room. We need that leeway, and one day every 4 years isn't going to cut it. So, or it could cut it, actually, it could be enough, but we are not in alignment with the moon cycles. So what that does for us on a frequency level is we don't align with the moon cycle, and when we don't align with the moon cycle, we are vibrating off kilter.
Kilter.
Is that the word I was looking for?
Sure, yeah.
But we're not vibrating on the pivot point.
We're not resonating with the environment that we're in. Yeah.
Could be that we're not vibrating on
Sorry. We're not vibrating on a kilter. Hence we're off it.
Okay. But yeah, so, and that has a huge impact on us. And as women, you know that if you're not cycling with the moon cycle, that's okay. But if you are cycling with the moon cycle, you energetically are so in sync and you are vibrating and you connect to the frequency that is around you, the energy of the earth around you. If you push through the winter, and you will be exhausted in the summertime, and it's sort of going to send you a little bit skew if you have overdone yourself, if you haven't like prepared yourself for the winter, you end up being exhausted into the springtime. And these are not time we kind of, yeah, we function a bit weird. And then, okay, you can add that. So that's just energetics of what's around you. But then you have your own energetic frequency where you're vibrating and how you vibrate best. So that could be looked at. And this is what I wanted to touch on. Hang on, let me see. Was there anything else you wanted to say? So a few things in the Hebrew calendar, they added in a month called Adar. I hope that's right. And
there's two
that
Adars, but they can't distinguish them. There's Adar 1, Adar 2.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Yeah.
And I tried to find out when that was, and the only thing I came was there was a leap month added called Sul or Sol, which was put in between June and July, and that and that was to extend the summertime. But it doesn't necessarily extend the summertime because the summer's only going to be however long the season is, whether you put a month in there or not. But I really understand now that Greg's calendar essentially was put in place. If we don't look at it from an frequency tilting off kilter perspective, it could just be to make it more succinct and simple, to simplify the process so that it is 365 days and then 366 on the leap year. Just to, that seems really simple. Or you could look at it from the other side and it could be that they deliberately did that to get us away from the moon cycles so we're not vibrating with the energetic frequency. I mean, either way, depends how you want to look at it. I therefore want people to think, well, if I vibrate with the frequency of the moon and the sun together and with my own understanding of my own being, like see how that feels. And I know personally, I've for the last 3 years been really honing in on at least the very least the full moons and the new moons and being really purposeful during those times. And then I've also brought in like equinoxes and transitional periods and focused on celebrating those, especially in the last year. But for the last 15 years, in accordance to Chinese medicine practices that I've like introduced is really nourishing certain aspects throughout the seasonal period. So I think even at a very base, if we look at those parts, we can have quite a powerful impact on how we function and how we can get ourselves back on kilter.
Well, if you look at human history relative to the Earth, I think I saw somewhere if the timeline was a meter, we've been here for a centimeter, if that.
Humans or us?
Humans. What you and I would call a human.
Including the Atlantis period of people?
No. It's more, I think, since modern agriculture started, that type of period.
Okay. Yeah.
But
so
in
5,000 years.
In truth, we don't know how long we go back because records stop around 200 to 500,000 years. We just popped up from nowhere. Yeah. That's another episode. Apart from, so all of the time from earliest records up until 1582, we followed the seasons every single calendar. The earliest recorded calendar, or the oldest, was found in southern Turkey called the lunisolar calendar, which is very similar to, it kind of combined a little bit of the sun and the moon, but it just followed the seasons. The pagans used the wheel of the year, which coincided with the seasons. Then it was the Republican calendar. Then it was the Julian calendar. So the Julian calendar it was probably the first hybrid of the seasons and celebrating the gods, with what we call January 1st. That's named after Janus, which is the two-faced god, one looking into the future, one looking into the past, or the year ahead, the year that has been. So he wanted to honor Janus god for the month. So he was saying start of the year is kind of there and then. But then the Gregorian calendar and all that sort of just got wiped out, really. So at least in the Julian calendar, I know April came from Aprilis, which was Aprilis is Latin for opening. So that's when the flowers and the leaves and flowers started to open up. You had May or Maya, which is the goddess of growth of plants. June, Junius, Latin for goddess Juno, and it goes on from there. But then the Gregorian calendar, we'll call it Greg's calendar. That's just easier to say. It really stamped out our connection to nature. And as you were saying, whether that's by design, and this is why I often reference back to the church, is because we've been so influenced by the church, we have no idea. And everything that we do, like a lot of our lives run according to the time. Like our lives are scheduled for a lot of people. And these calendars and these times are put in place essentially by the church because it was inconveniencing them to have celebrations on a specific seasonal day because it didn't suit them. So they literally changed time.
It's such an interesting thing. Oh, what did you just say then about, yeah, the calendar and the church and their control and how this calendar actually enslaves us? It's what we were listening to because it takes us off kilter and it takes us away. It takes us away from what humans have been doing for eons and eons.
Yeah.
And oh gosh, there's so many things in this. Now, I wanted to anything more, Matt? What else did you want to share in that
No, so I'm
sense?
going to go on a tangent about the church. So you go.
Bring it back. You have been forgiven for your sins. Let's bring it back over here. All right.
Amen.
So what I wanted to talk about in this, which I find really interesting. So in the probably the past 3 years as well, I have been studying studying under a man named Jonathan Shubs, and he has created, or not created, he has brought together a lot of literature and philosophy from a Chinese medicine perspective, and he has created the unified acupuncture treatment or unified acupuncture theory. And realistically, it's just that he's creating a unified acupuncture theory because there are so many different acupuncture theories that are out there, and it's sort of his whole thing is to make it bring it back to unity because obviously it stemmed from one initial piece, yin and yang, right? So um he talks about he bases a lot, I mean, he has a lot of different works, but 5 elements and things, and then also the I Ching. The I Ching is one of the most renowned books in Chinese philosophy or Chinese medicine philosophy, and it's the book of changes, and it's literally a book that's based upon Chinese how would you say, well, the Chinese perspective of the changes of the seasons. So he uses these 24 solar terms, or what we call the hexagrams, 24 different hexagrams, and that's based upon the yin and the yang. So where it starts is you have a straight line. The straight line is yang, and the two broken lines is yin.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, easy way to remember it is Yang is more masculine and male, and he has a penis. And then Yin is feminine and female, and she has a vulva with 2 sides.
That's how it works.
Easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That so simple.
Mm.
Anyway, so then that starts. You have the yin and the yang. Then they split. Then you have so we've got yang yang, then we have yin within yang. That's on one side. And then that splits and you've got yang over yin, and then you have full yin, yin, yin. Anyway, then it splits again and you have yang, yang, full yang, 3 yangs, 3 straight lines. Then you have on the other side, you've got 3 layers of broken lines. Anyway, so there's 24 of those hexagrams. Then when you break it, when it comes down, you're actually looking at the seasons. So you have the full yin season, which would be your autumn, winter. Then you have your full yang, which is your spring, summer. And then it breaks down, further and further into the increments that is the 24 hexagrams of the seasons. Now, what I wanted to touch on here is there is a calendar in this, and it bases upon the idea, and I love this because it puts theory or like practical calendar understanding onto what we would call the 5 elemental understanding. So I've spoken about this for a lot when we were talking into the 5 element series we did last year. And either way, the center, so 5 elements is either 5 elements around the outside, but right now what we're going to talk about it in a sense is how the earth is the center. And then we have the fire, summer, autumn, metal, winter, water, wood, spring. And so the earth stays in the center, which the earth is sort of seen as the transitional period. Now, I've spoken about this before, but I'll touch on it again. And so the transitional period is essentially called the intercalary period, which whilst I was doing this like little bit of research, they also call it the embolismic month. or the leap month, which I've touched on before, but those are the times in between the seasons. And what that means, it's the transitional period between the seasons. So what you said before about Janus being, this change between before and after, or that celebration of that god before and after. Is that what you said?
Oh, the two-faced God looking forward and back at the
Two-faced,
same time.
looking forward and backwards at the same time. Right. Okay, yeah. So that is sort of happening 4 times throughout the year in this sort of in the Chinese calendar, if that makes sense. So there is a period of time that can be seen as the intercalary time, this change, this period of transformation, transition, and we feel it. And it's funny because when we are actually in the southern hemisphere, we are in the transitional period now. What's the date today?
31st.
The 4th. So we are actually at today is our last day of transition. On the 4th of February, we've actually transitioned and autumn begins tomorrow.
With you.
Anyway, so autumn begins tomorrow. So autumn actually is from the 5th of February to the 17th of April, in accordance with, and I don't know because I'm not in Sydney, Australia right now. I don't know whether you've noticed the change, or like there's been actually people have told me that the weather's been crazy. Like it's been hot and it's been windy and it's been cold, and a lot of people have either could it be that there's like this geoengineering aspect, or is it that actually from the Chinese calendar we're actually transitioning, which makes perfect sense because we just had the new moon last week and we're transitioning out of the winter into the springtime. And that's why there's sort of like this, a few weeks time of the New Year celebration. It's not just that day that happens. It's like we transition and we spend time transitioning, but we don't have that we don't give ourselves that time anymore. So that is essentially, yeah, what I wanted to say about that. So it is really, really interesting how, yeah, the hexagrams are actually in 24. And there is this thing in Chinese medicine where they want everything in fives or sixes, and they want everything in certain ways. And sometimes it doesn't fit, so they squeeze it to fit. And that's where I think the unified theory comes in, and actually he has done a lot of work, and it doesn't actually squeeze to fit, it just fits.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty cool.
There's also a lot of going back. I want to try and finish on the point that you just started with there, but going back to when you were saying, these calendars they've been changed by design. So just with that concept, by changing that, it keeps our consciousness outside of ourselves. It keeps us arguably too grounded to earth. And yes,
in the
we're
physical plane, you mean?
yeah,
Too much,
like in the material plane.
material. Yeah.
And a lot of when you were talking about the 24 and you've got the elements outside the earth, which is the centerpiece, what came to mind is that our natural state would be with those etheric elements. You need each one of those to make qi. So qi in Chinese means steam. Qi also is energy. So the consciousness that's emerging from those elements is the qi that flows through us. But as you were saying, it can flow through us if we allow that transitional period of change and just go with the flow of it and let it flow. But if we have to do everything and it starts and stops at midnight, then we don't really have that because everything's got to change 1 minute past midnight or whenever the allocated time slot is. So that's a way that we've been kept in the material and haven't been really allowed to go into our natural spring state, which is the flowers opening and the earth coming to life again.
I want to touch on that too with the transition, because I talk to people and they have, they've got their office shutdown happens on the
Mm,
2020 between the 20th and 23rd or something like that in December. And their office shuts down for 2 weeks, right?
mm.
But everything needs to be done
Yeah.
and that everything needs to be completed. And then we're starting afresh next year. It's only 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You don't even have, and it's not even 2 weeks, I think. It's only 10 days.
Mm,
And in that space of time, like this is why I'm pretty firm about Prepuary, is that, I mean, and we've just come out of that. You've literally just landed and you have still got time, luckily for you, if you wanted to get to know yourself this year a little deeper from our perspectives, from the Chinese astrology and the numerology aspects. Oh, I want to touch on that in a second. And you've got this time, like give yourself this time and this season of full abundance and enjoying what you're reaping so that you can actually fully spend that time in reflection of what you gained from the year that is or the year that was, so that you can take with you what you need and what you want going forth. I notice in myself, for me personally, I am an Aquarius rising. So January is my first house. It's my go month. It's my, it gives me all the energy. But if you don't have Aquarius, if you don't have an Aquarius ascendant, January is not a good time for you for
mm.
that. It's not a good time for going. And so it's something to be really conscious of, that whilst the energy is being pushing you to go in that time, to get ready, to prep, to flourish and to give everything out. And we've had the new year, so it's time to go now. If your energy isn't there, that makes perfect sense if you're not an Aquarius rising. Aquarius is opposite Leo. So Leo is to go alone, Aquarius is to go together. So the lion walks their own path, all those things. And the Aquarius is more the humanitarian, whole, like bringing everyone together, wanting everyone to work, wanting it to work for everyone. So with that in mind, Matt,
Yes.
over to you.
What's the numerology?
That's not what we were talking about. Anyway, okay, so that's something that actually, when I was searching stuff, I realized, yeah, so that's what we were talking about. Leo, therefore, it would be really hard for a Leo at the beginning of the year. If you are a Leo ascendant, July is going to be the time when you have the most energy to get your things done. That's going to be your first house in astrology. So you're going to have a real big vibe happening then. But if you don't have that, if that makes sense, if you don't have, if you've got an Aquarius rising, January is going to be good for you. Anyway, how does this all fit in if we follow these frameworks, like even astrology, right?
Mm,
How does that sit in? Because they essentially are based upon, well, they're not really based upon the dates, but they sort of are.
mm,
If your birthday lands in this date, between this date, that's Greg's calendar.
mhm,
And astrology dates back, thousands of years. So even like numerology, right? And the numbers, specifically the numbers, like that dates back, Vedic traditions date back, 1400 years ago. So Vedic numerology, and then you've got the kind of Western numerology that's more based on Pythagoras, and where he, dives into more of, how to mathematically understand all facets of life and how you can, use your letters in your name to give you a numerological number. Vedic numerology has the same, where you can use the letters in your name, which I find really interesting because me personally, my kids' names were very specifically chosen. And whether or not you had any forethought or consciousness to that, I truly believe that children choose their names. Even if you're a mum and you've named your kid something that you didn't really want to. Like that kid chose to be Greg over being, I don't know, Epiphany or something. So when it comes to numerology, what's your thinking that around the whole Greg situation, because we wouldn't be born on the 29th if we were basing ourselves on the Chinese calendar.
Well, maybe you and I decided to be born when we were born to unravel the raveling and to lift the veil that has been placed upon. And so we could share that with the world. Maybe that was our role with that. Here we are.
Absolutely. Likely.
Probs.
Yeah, for sure. So that's something that I know that my Western mind really gets to and is sort of like, thinking, well, hang on, the numbers would be different, but it's actually just coming back to the numbers are.
But it's also like
are.
we follow time. Time is linear. Time as we know it is linear. But yet we're the only creatures that operate and are governed by this linear measurement that we call time. But a dog operates on a different sort of time scale.
Well, he operates on the same sun and moon.
But I'm saying, like, for one human year, there's 7 dog years as an equivalent. So it's a different sort of time thing, insert word. So we're the only creatures that are governed by that. Like a dog doesn't come home at 6 p.m. and has dinner because it's dinner time. They eat when they're hungry. We don't do that. We eat 3 meals a day because we're sort of told to, because it's dinner time, it's lunchtime, it's breakfast time.
What do you want to say about that?
There was a point I was going with. It's escaped me. Maybe that's just something I needed to get off my chest.
Okay. Dogs again.
Yeah. I shouldn't have said dogs.
No problem with dogs. Dogs are what they are, Matt. Yeah. And a cuddle from a dog is like nothing, like true, pure love, right?
That one, I guess.
Yes. And so touching on that, if you are concerned that your numerology reading that you just had from the Bali healer feels a little bit off kilter, remember that whilst the numerology may be connected to your Greg's calendar, it is also Greg's calendar right now, because 500 years ago that just is or was created. So it just is. And so we can trust the numerology that we're reading and the understanding, because it's just like the words that we're using today are different to the words that we used then. The energy is the same. So I was just tying in the idea that the words we use have power.
So much so that they shape our reality. But we're going to do a different episode on that another time.
Let's drop the mic. Thanks so much for listening. Don't forget to sign up to our email list. We have an email coming this month, and we have a few still. Yeah, those spots are open if you want to learn about your year. Matt and I are ready and raring to go.
And just quickly, if you want to leave us a warm review at a 5-star rating, that's totally fine too.
Yes.
But
and
in your own time.
In your own time. Peace.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Wizard and the Priestess. Thanks for stopping by. Stay connected and be open.